Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the new plugin which is included with Cubase 10 and some of the updates on the other plugins. So the new plugin is called Distroyer. Now I've inserted it on this drum loop track here, so I'll just bypass it. This is just one of the drum loops that's included with Cubase. Nothing particularly interesting, but as ever I like to stick to content that you'd already have. So if you want to play around, you can do the same thing, etc. So here we have Distroyer. Now, Distroyer is a distortion plugin, as the name implies, but it's quite useful because it's got some features on it which I think are the kind of thing that often you would end up producing yourself by having a distortion as a send and playing around with what you could do with it as inserted on another channel, etc. So quite often I find myself using distortion as a send because you tend to lose some of the bass when you're applying distortion. So this has got it's not, you know, the world's greatest, you know, most amazing plugin, etc., but it's quite a nice plugin to have included. So really it's fairly basic, so we'll just take a quick look. So we've got a mix control, so we'll just start off with that at 50%, and as we introduce some drive, you can hear that distortion, you can see what's going on here, and you can play around with the graph, the offset, etc. So you can play around with what you get there, how hard, so you can see we're getting more and more squared, etc. The mix control is the first nice thing I find on this, because we can go from no distortion to just the distorted track like that, and that instantly makes it quite nice and usable, because you can just add a little bit of, you know, a little bit of hard grit or a lot of not much grit, and anywhere in between. So that's quite nice. Now the next thing is it's got a built-in filter, which means you can isolate parts of the frequency spectrum and just work on that, which again, it's not something that you can't do using the EQ in the channel, but it's nice to have it just built in. So often you find yourself working and wanting to have kind of textural sound effects, etc., and this is really useful for that. So we'll just whack that up to 100%, engage the filth quite a lot, and then you can have just that high end or just grunt low down. So we can have like mid-range distortion, or just top end distortion, etc. So just for that, it's quite nice. Say it's not, you know, it's not like they've included the world's most amazing plugin, but it's a real nice functional workman-like plugin that you can use, and I've already found loads of uses for it where I think that's good. It will just mean my workflow's much quicker. And often with things like this, I find that if the barrier to you doing it is a little too high, you end up just not experimenting. So although you could do this with, you know, setting up your EQ on your channel, etc., and then having it as a send and so on, it's often it doesn't happen because you think, yeah, it's going to take me, you know, 3 minutes to do that, and I probably won't like it, and then I've got to faff around and blah blah blah. Whereas this, you literally just insert the plugin. Obviously you could save it as a preset, etc., and away you go. So that's Distroyer. Now on the other plugins, there's not really much news, because nearly all the other plugins have merely been updated to the new UI, so the new graphic design, and then they've been made to VST3. So, for instance, the Studio EQ, which always looked a bit naff to me, now looks a lot more like Frequency. So although I don't think there are any new features in it, it certainly doesn't look like it. It's much nicer to use, and a more consistent user interface generally means you spend less time scratching your head. The old one looked a bit slick, as you will see. I'm going to put that in there so you can see the difference between the two. But the old one was always a bit like, oh, I'm not going to show you what any of the controls do because I'm too busy looking cool. And this is much more, you know, much more like a pro piece of equipment that you would use in the real world. We've got things such as, you know, all those plugins which have been around, I think, since Cubase SX1 or 2. Things like Transformer, which again, The old version, you can see, looked quite different and, you know, quite out of date. And I'm not just saying this like, oh yeah, great, it's the new look. They're much more functional, and also I think consistency of the appearance is important, but these have also been made so they will work on HiDPI displays. So if you've got something like a 4K display which is running effectively at 1920 by 1080, so you get much nicer font rendering and so on, these plugins will now look nice rather than look like the horrible kind of stretch blocky things that they have done in the past. So we've got some, you know, the old classics: ping pong delay, distortion, Roomworks SE, although Roomworks didn't get a makeover, so poor old Roomworks, maybe that's coming soon. And they're VST3 as well, which isn't hugely important for most people. I don't think there's that much of a functional difference, but it will at least mean things seem to run a little bit more smoothly, because certainly I've found with third-party plugins quite often the VST2 versions are less reliable and often get blacklisted, whereas VST3 ones don't, but you'd certainly hope they wouldn't do with their own plugins. The last thing is Reverence. So Reverence itself has got some minor changes, which should mean that if you're importing impulse responses, you're less likely to have problems, because you may have found sometimes it doesn't always behave itself impeccably. But the other thing is they've added some new content. So I've just got one of the many, I think there's about 30 new presets which have been added. But this one is, well, it's personally interesting to me because it's a Great British Spring reverb. Now, I have a client who I rebuilt his studio recently, and he swears by his Great British Spring. He loves the sound of it. He uses it really effectively. It perfectly fits the kind of stuff that he does. And he said there's no alternative to it. Now, although I took my own impulse response from it, obviously that's not available to everybody, but now this is. So this is the Great British Spring. So if we play it with it isolated, so again, it's the same drum loop as before. And then this is obviously a full 100% mix, but you get the idea of what it sounds like if you've not heard one before. So you may well be having that moment where you go, oh, that's what that sound is. Yeah, so the great sound of a spring reverb, etc. There are quite a few of these which are available. So we'll just take a quick look. It's easiest, actually, to pick them out in Media Bay. So here in Media Bay, this is the Vintage Verb collection, which is the new one. And you can see there are all these plugins here, which are all taken from classic vintage reverbs. So that's all of those there. So there's quite a few, and they're all useful in that vintage reverb kind of sound. So if that's the kind of thing you're after, even if it's often it's very useful for unusual effects, for soundscapes, etc. That can be really good. But say they are all in there and all available straight away in Reverence. So those are the main change, which is really Distroyer and then the update to the older plugins and then that content to Reverence. So again, nothing earth-shattering, but nice to have along with all the other new features. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out my book, The Complete Guide to Music Technology Using Cubase 10. It provides you with a thorough grounding in all aspects of using Cubase, music technology, and music theory. Follow the link for more information and to order a copy today. Thanks for watching.